In the spring of 1940, Britain found itself staring at a maritime problem that no amount of tradition, prestige, or battleship tonnage could solve. The English Channel, normally a narrow but manageable stretch of water, had transformed into a nightly arena where German fast-attack craft struck with precision, then disappeared into the darkness long before British warships could intervene. Each evening, merchant convoys braced for sudden flashes on the horizon, rapid silhouettes racing across the waves, and a hit-and-run style of warfare that conventional naval strength was never designed to counter. German S-boats, nicknamed E-boats by the British, operated like ghosts. They attacked quickly, seldom lingered, and seemed immune to interception. Destroyers, the Royal Navy's primary surface hunters, were powerful ships with impressive range and armament, but they simply couldn't operate effectively in the shallow and obstacle-filled coastal waters where these raiders thrived. A destroyer cost over £200,000, took more than a year to build, required a large crew, and, perhaps most importantly, was too valuable to risk in close-quarters nighttime duels with fast, elusive boats barely the size of a tennis court. No matter how skilled their crews were, destroyers simply couldn't accelerate fast enough, maneuver sharply enough, or patrol economically enough to blanket the coastline every night. Britain needed a different answer, something that wasn't a scaled-down destroyer, but an entirely new category of war machine. The Admiralty needed speed, numbers, low cost, and a vessel so expendable that losing one wouldn't shake naval strategy. They needed something lean, responsive, mass-producible, and built not in naval shipyards but in small private yards scattered across the country. The solution was unexpectedly simple: lightweight plywood boats powered by high-performance petrol engines. They would be called motor torpedo boats, MTBs. They were inexpensive compared to steel warships, required only a fraction of the time to assemble, and could be produced by craftsmen who had previously made yachts rather than frigates. These were not ships in the traditional sense. They were fast, compact attack craft built for the singular purpose of striking first and vanishing before the enemy had time to react. What made them revolutionary wasn't any single component but the entire idea behind them. They weren't designed around endurance or firepower. They were built around an insight that naval planners had long overlooked. In coastal waters, the battle isn't about heavy armor or long-range guns. It's about who can control the spaces where the big ships can't go. The groundwork for this new approach had actually been laid years earlier by engineers who, long before the war began, sensed where future coastal combat might be heading. Among these visionaries was Commander Peter Duquesne of the Vosper Company. Vosper traditionally built high-end motor yachts, sleek, fast craft designed to skim across the water, not to engage in military action. But Duquesne recognized that the same technologies that made yachts swift and agile could be adapted for something far more consequential. In 1936, he took a gamble. Without any official order or guarantee, Vosper built a prototype fast attack boat using nothing more than company funds, professional intuition, and a healthy dose of hope. The boat, eventually known as MTB 102, was crafted from diagonal layers of mahogany, held together with glue and thousands upon thousands of rivets. It looked almost like a sports craft, not a warship. Light, narrow, and powered by high-octane engines, it reached speeds that stunned observers. At full throttle, it cut across the water like a thrown spear. The Admiralty tested the vessel, impressed by its performance but hesitant to commit. After all, plywood didn't inspire confidence. A single shell from a coastal battery could puncture its hull. Heavy seas battered it relentlessly. Petrol fumes made the vessel smell like a floating fuel depot. On paper, these boats were fragile and risky. But history does not reward theoretical perfection. It rewards solutions that exist when they need it. And in May 1940, when France collapsed and German forces gained access to the Channel coastline, the Admiralty could no longer rely on theoretical arguments. Convoys were being targeted nightly. British shipping was suffering losses that threatened supply lines. And the traditional naval toolkit suddenly felt outdated. That's when the plywood boats went from promising experiments to urgent necessities. Orders flooded in, not for 10, not for 20, but for hundreds. Britain needed a fleet of these fast, inexpensive craft, and it needed them immediately. Shipyards that had never built a naval vessel suddenly found themselves contracted to produce MTBs. Furniture makers transitioned to crafting frames. Yacht builders fit torpedo tubes where luxury cabins once sat a day. Small workshops that had once specialized in raceboats now measured engine mounts for marine-adapted aircraft engines. This distributed production model allowed MTBs to be built at a pace that steel warships could never match. Destroyers required massive slipways and specialized foundries. MTBs required woodworking shops, teams of skilled carpenters, and raw materials that were readily accessible. A handful of workers could construct a hull in weeks, not months. Engine installation took additional time, but far less than a comparable steel ship. By mid-1940, Britain was not merely building MTBs, it was mass-producing them. Yet the real test wasn't how quickly they could be assembled or how cheaply they could be delivered. The true test awaited them in the Channel waters, where E-boats prowled boldly and merchant ships depended on every escort available. The MTBs would soon be asked to do more than prove their design. They would need to rewrite Britain's coastal war doctrine, shift enemy behaviour, and make the Channel once again a place where British ships could sail with confidence. Their performance would soon speak louder than the doubts that preceded them. The newly built flotillas did not have the luxury of easing into combat. Within weeks of commissioning, they were thrust into night operations across the Channel, where the environment itself felt hostile. The waters were unpredictable, the weather could shift from calm to turbulent in minutes, and navigation relied heavily on experience rather than instruments. Yet the MTBs slipped into this world almost naturally. Their shallow draft allowed them to skim across areas where larger ships hesitated. Their rapid acceleration meant they could reposition faster than any traditional escort. And perhaps most importantly, their crews quickly adapted to the rhythm of coastal warfare, an environment driven more by intuition and responsiveness than by textbook maneuvers. While destroyers required complex coordination and extensive command structures, MTBs operated in compact, flexible units, typically 6 to 8 boats per flotilla. This formation size turned out to be ideal. It was enough to deliver meaningful striking power yet small enough to remain agile when German fast-attack craft scattered in different directions. Each MTB carried only a dozen crew members, most of them young volunteers who preferred the raw immediacy of small boat action over the procedural routines of larger ships. Their average age was lower than that of any other naval branch, and their willingness to take calculated risks became one of the force's defining strengths. Their tactics evolved quickly. Instead of patrolling broad areas, MTBs focused on likely approach corridors, narrows where German craft had limited maneuvering options. They often ran quietly on low-power auxiliary engines, hiding in coastal shadows until a target revealed itself. When an E-boat silhouette emerged against the faint glow of the horizon, the MTBs would transition from stealth to full power in seconds. Engines roared, hulls lifted, and the chase began. The objective wasn't to engage in prolonged battles but to close to optimal torpedo range as rapidly as possible. Optimal range for an MTB torpedo attack was surprisingly close, often under 500 yards. Hitting from farther out decreased accuracy, and the boats did not have time for long setup runs. Instead, they approached invisibly, fired at the moment of maximum advantage, and then darted away into the night. The combination of speed, proximity, and unpredictability made these attacks difficult for the enemy to evade. Even merchant ships with minimal maneuvering capability could be targeted effectively, and supply barges, slow and vulnerable, became prime opportunities for disrupting German logistics. But what truly distinguished the MTBs was their ability to strike repeatedly. Because they were so inexpensive and quick to refuel, rearm, and repair, losses that would cripple a destroyer squadron barely dented the operational tempo of MTB units. A damaged boat might be out for days, not months. A lost boat could be replaced in weeks. This sustainability allowed the Royal Navy to maintain constant pressure in the Channel, especially during periods when German forces relied heavily on coastal convoys to move supplies along occupied shores. As their presence increased, so did their responsibilities. MTBs weren't limited to hunting E-boats. They began conducting independent raids on German traffic lanes. They ambushed ammunition barges, intercepted smaller escort craft, and laid shallow water mines in key passages. Their versatility quickly expanded. Some flotillas adapted their decks for additional guns, transforming into hybrid gunboats capable of suppressing shore positions or providing covering fire for commando operations. Others added radar or experimental communication devices to increase coordination in low-visibility environments. But while equipment upgrades were helpful, the core advantage remained the same: human skill. MTB crews developed an instinctive understanding of how their boats behaved in different sea conditions. They learned to judge wind, tide, and coastal contours with remarkable precision. Many became adept at making last-second course corrections while traveling at over 40 knots, a feat that required both dexterity and experience. This familiarity with their craft often gave them the edge over German crews, who typically operated larger and more heavily armed boats that couldn't maneuver as sharply in tight waters. Even so, the danger was constant. The boats were built of wood and carried large quantities of petrol, an unavoidable hazard. A single tracer round penetrating the fuel tanks could compromise the entire vessel. Crews learned to treat every approach with caution, relying on speed and timing rather than exchange of fire. They mastered evasive maneuvers, using smokescreens and hard turns to avoid salvos. Survival depended on splitting attention between navigation, target acquisition, and threat recognition, tasks that had to be performed simultaneously without error. While these missions were hazardous, the speed at which MTBs could disengage gave them an advantage over many adversaries. German coastal batteries struggled to track them effectively, and even E-boats found them difficult opponents, especially when MTB flotillas operated in coordinated groups. By mid-1941, MTB crews had developed enough confidence to challenge enemy formations that previously would have been considered too dangerous to engage. Their successes began to accumulate gradually, but steadily. A transport vessel here, a supply barge there, an escort trawler forced to retreat under pressure. These weren't standalone triumphs, they were pieces of a growing strategic pattern. The Royal Navy's coastal forces were beginning to shift the balance in Britain's favour. German commanders noted the change as well. What had once been predictable coastal lanes became contested zones requiring constant vigilance. Each German convoy now needed additional escorts, more careful planning, and heavier armament to remain protected. Resources once allocated to offensive operations had to be diverted to defend against the expanding threat posed by plywood boats. And the transformation was only beginning. By 1942, the presence of MTBs had reshaped the tactical landscape of the Channel to a degree that few naval planners had anticipated. British flotillas had become a constant and often unpredictable force, appearing suddenly near shipping routes that the Germans previously considered safe. Even when MTBs didn't find a target, the mere possibility of their presence forced German convoys to take circuitous routes, travel only under specific weather conditions, or operate with stronger escorts. Every adjustment slowed the flow of supplies, increased logistical overhead, and diverted vessels that might otherwise have been used elsewhere. The adaptability of MTBs also became evident in the variety of missions they supported. On some nights, they were tasked with intercepting fast-moving raiders. On others, they escorted Allied convoys across narrow passages. At times, they acted as forward scouts, relaying vital reconnaissance about enemy movements to larger naval units operating farther offshore. This multifaceted role made them invaluable at a time when the Royal Navy was stretched thin across multiple theatres. The Royal Navy also learned to employ MTBs in ways that leveraged their psychological impact. German crews knew that once MTBs were spotted, an engagement could occur at any moment. Even with heavier armament and better armour, German fast attack boats couldn't ignore the danger posed by these smaller adversaries. An MTB needed only a brief window to deliver a torpedo strike, and the consequences of a successful hit were severe. As a result, E-boats increasingly adopted defensive postures, giving up some of their previous offensive confidence. One of the most critical aspects of MTB operations was communication. Coordination between boats was essential, especially during night raids when visibility was poor. A single miscalculated turn could break the formation's cohesion or cause boats to cross each other's attack paths. Early operations relied heavily on signal lamps and practice maneuvers. As technology improved, radios became more reliable, allowing for tighter coordination. This evolution further enhanced the flotilla's ability to react to unfolding situations quickly, an advantage that larger warships could rarely match. The crews themselves formed tight-knit teams, bonded by long hours at sea, constant exposure to harsh weather, and shared dependence on one another. Living conditions were minimal, cramped, and frequently uncomfortable. Sleeping quarters were tight, and the constant smell of fuel became part of daily life. Meals were simple, often eaten while underway, and privacy was non-existent. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, MTB crews developed a high level of camaraderie. They trusted one another completely, a trust that proved essential during split-second maneuvers executed in the dark. This cohesion also translated into faster learning curves. Lessons from each engagement were disseminated quickly among flotillas. If a particular tactic worked, such as using smoke screens earlier in an approach, or staggering torpedo launches to confuse enemy range estimation, it was adopted immediately across units. This rapid adaptation stood in stark contrast to the rigid structure of larger naval operations, where altering procedures required extensive approval chains. There were, however, limits to what plywood boats could accomplish. Rough seas were their natural enemy. High waves could compromise their ability to maintain speed and stability, making nighttime operations dangerous. Likewise, enemy fire, even from small-caliber weapons, posed real risks given the boat's construction. For these reasons, commanders carefully chose when and where to deploy MTBs, maximizing their strengths while minimizing exposure to situations that would play to the enemy's advantage. Nonetheless, the flotilla's contributions continued to grow. As British intelligence improved, MTBs were increasingly deployed to intercept specific high-value targets, such as ammunition transports or fuel barges supplying German coastal divisions. These attacks had outsized effects, not just in terms of physical damage but in the disruption they caused. A single lost fuel shipment could delay German patrols for days. A sunk ammunition barge might hinder operations along an entire stretch of coast. The growing impact did not go unnoticed. By mid-1942, German commanders began allocating more resources to coastal protection. Additional patrol boats, escort trawlers, and even small destroyers were assigned to guard convoys moving through contested waters. This shift was significant. Vessels that could have supported operations elsewhere were now tied down in defensive roles. In this sense, the MTBs were achieving strategic results disproportionate to their size and cost. The Royal Navy recognized these successes and continued to refine its use of coastal forces. Training programs improved, new designs were introduced, and flotillas expanded. Meanwhile, the boats themselves became more capable. Later models incorporated better engines, improved armament, and reinforced areas around fuel storage to enhance survivability. Radar equipment also began appearing on some craft, dramatically improving situational awareness during low-visibility operations. The momentum was shifting. What had started as an improvised solution born of necessity was evolving into a cornerstone of Britain's coastal defense strategy. The E-boats that once roamed the Channel with confidence now encountered opposition wherever they turned. And the MTBs, despite their simple materials and modest origins, were proving themselves indispensable. As 1943 approached, their role would expand even further, because now, the question was no longer whether plywood boats could make a difference. It was how far their impact could reach. By the time 1943 arrived, MTBs had transformed from emergency stopgaps into fully integrated tools of coastal warfare. Flotillas were no longer reacting to German movements, they were anticipating them. Patrol patterns became more sophisticated, coordination with intelligence units grew stronger, and the boats themselves underwent incremental upgrades that enhanced both their versatility and reliability. One of the most important developments during this period was the shift toward offensive patrolling. Instead of waiting for E-boats to approach convoys, MTBs began taking the initiative, entering waters closer to occupied ports and intercepting outbound raiders before they could reach major shipping lanes. This proactive strategy proved effective, as attacking E-boats early in their sortie often caught them at their most vulnerable, still organizing into formations or navigating confined channels. The MTB's maneuverability made them especially dangerous in these environments. Their shallow draft allowed them to move through areas where deeper-hulled German craft had to slow down or navigate carefully. This advantage became particularly important in narrow passages along the French and Belgian coastlines. While E-boats were certainly faster in open water, MTBs could exploit confined waters more effectively, using coastal contours and shifting currents to position themselves advantageously. As these patrols increased in frequency, German commanders were forced to deploy more resources to protect even routine movements. Torpedo boats, minesweepers, and escort vessels accompanied convoys that, before the war, would have traveled without concern. This growing defensive burden stretched German coastal forces thin and forced them to prioritize which areas required the most protection. As a result, some routes became lightly defended, giving MTBs even more opportunities to strike. The flotillas also diversified their missions in ways that expanded their operational value. For example, they supported intelligence gathering operations by covertly observing enemy movements close to shore. They assisted in laying shallow water minefields that disrupted supply lines. They even participated in coordinated raids with larger naval units, acting as scouts or fast response elements during larger engagements. Their speed allowed them to take on roles traditionally performed by aircraft, such as rapid reconnaissance along selected areas of coastline. While aircraft could cover greater distances, MTBs had the advantage of being able to approach stealthily at low altitude, essentially skimming the surface in silence. They could remain on station longer and provide continuous monitoring of specific routes. The essential ingredient behind this versatility was resourcefulness. MTB crews had grown adept at improvisation, modifying equipment, adapting tactics, and finding creative solutions to unpredictable challenges. Their boats, though simple in construction, allowed for rapid adjustments. Some flotillas added makeshift armor around critical areas. Others installed additional communication gear, reinforcing the flotilla's ability to operate cohesively even during high-intensity engagements. These enhancements proved especially valuable during operations where timing was crucial. One such scenario involved intercepting German coastal convoys transporting critical supplies. These convoys varied widely in composition. Some contained small barges loaded with fuel, others carried equipment, and occasionally, larger vessels moved troops or specialized cargo. The MTB's ability to strike quickly at weak points in these formations delivered cumulative strategic value. Even sinking a single vessel could disrupt supply chains for days, straining German logistics. German forces sought countermeasures, including deploying lookouts equipped with flares and searchlights. They began using decoy routes and adjusted sailing patterns to minimize exposure. Yet these changes further increased their workload and reduced efficiency. Every precaution implemented in response to MTB threats required additional personnel, fuel, or planning, all of which compounded the pressure on German operations. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy continued enhancing its coastal warfare doctrine. Lessons learned from each engagement fed directly into training programs for new crews. Simulators, classroom briefings, and practical drills helped newcomers master situations they were likely to encounter. The training emphasized quick decision-making, coordinated maneuvers, and accurate torpedo deployment under pressure. As a result, flotillas became increasingly capable even as the operational tempo intensified. Despite this progress, the sea remained unforgiving. Weather conditions could undermine even the most carefully planned missions. High winds and rough surf could force cancellations or compromise attack approaches. Crews learned to read the sea almost instinctively, understanding when the waves concealed their movements or when visibility favored the enemy. This relationship with the coastal environment became fundamental to their success, a blend of technical skill and intuitive awareness. As the conflict moved toward its decisive stages, MTBs occupied a position no one had predicted at the war's outset. They had grown from unconventional solutions into indispensable assets, shaping the outcome of coastal operations. But their most challenging tasks were still ahead, especially as preparations began for an undertaking larger than any previous mission, the invasion that would redefine the course of the war. The spring of 1944 marked a turning point not only for the MTBs but for the entire Allied war effort. Preparations for the planned amphibious landings on the European mainland demanded absolute secrecy and control over the surrounding waters. Any hint of the gathering invasion fleet, any accidental encounter, any German reconnaissance run observing unusual movements could jeopardize the entire operation. Maintaining the illusion of normalcy became essential, and MTBs played a critical part in safeguarding that secrecy. In the months leading up to the invasion, MTB flotillas intensified their patrols along the southern coast of England, establishing a near-constant presence across key maritime approaches. Their goal was twofold: prevent German reconnaissance craft from venturing too close to British shores, and ensure that any movements toward the assembly zones were intercepted quickly and quietly. The MTBs, with their speed and agility, excelled at these tasks. Operating primarily at night, they created an invisible barrier. Any German craft attempting to cross it had to contend with vigilant patrol patterns, unpredictable interception routes, and crews experienced in nighttime engagements. MTBs tracked suspicious radar signatures, investigated unknown lights on the horizon, and coordinated with other coastal units to ensure nothing passed through their net unnoticed. These patrols demanded endurance. Nights were long, visibility was poor, and the risk of misidentification was ever present. Crews needed to distinguish between friendly and hostile vessels in seconds. Hesitation could endanger the mission, while rushing a decision could threaten an Allied ship. This sharpened awareness became second nature, and by the time the invasion fleet began massing, MTB crews had refined their approach to perfection. As the day of the landings approached, the scale of the naval concentration reached unprecedented levels. Hundreds of ships, transport vessels, warships, support craft, assembled quietly along the coast. MTBs shielded these build-up areas with unwavering consistency. Every night, they patrolled the perimeter, ensuring that nothing slipped through. When the invasion finally began, their responsibilities expanded further. MTBs escorted landing forces, screened flanks, and disrupted any German attempts to interfere. They also played a key role in misleading German defenders. Some flotillas intentionally created distractions, making the enemy believe that activity was occurring far from the real landing zones. Others coordinated with deception units broadcasting false signals. During the landings themselves, MTBs provided rapid response capability. When German elements attempted to send reinforcements across coastal channels, MTB flotillas intercepted them. These engagements were fast and intense, with little margin for error. But by 1944, the crews had gained enough experience to handle these situations instinctively. Their ability to adapt to rapidly changing conditions proved invaluable in ensuring the success of the initial assault waves. Beyond the beachheads, MTBs continued operating along the flanks of the expanding Allied front. They monitored potential evacuation routes, intercepted retreating vessels, and provided support for follow-on operations. Their speed allowed them to respond to calls quickly, giving the Allies a significant advantage during the chaotic opening days of the campaign. These contributions were critical, but they also highlighted the broader significance of the MTB's development. They had transitioned fully from coastal defenders to active participants in large-scale operations, integrating with the broader Allied strategy. Their low-cost, mass production, and rapid deployment capabilities had enabled the Royal Navy to use them without restraint, employing them frequently and aggressively where heavier ships would have been too slow or too vulnerable. Once Normandy was secured, MTBs continued to patrol the channel, now focusing on preventing German forces from launching counterattacks or disrupting supply lines to the newly established beachheads. Their presence ensured that reinforcements arriving from Britain had safe passage, and that German attempts to regroup or relocate along the coastline were hindered. By the end of the summer of 1944, MTBs had become an indispensable component of Allied coastal operations. They had supported one of the most complex military undertakings in history, proving that speed, adaptability, and numbers could achieve what traditional naval power alone could not. And as the Allies pushed deeper into Europe, MTBs continued to influence the flow of the war, even as new challenges arose in the coastal regions that remained contested. The next phase of their mission would demand the same qualities that had made them successful: agility, resourcefulness, and the ability to turn modest materials into powerful strategic leverage. As the war shifted into its final phases, MTBs continued to demonstrate their effectiveness across multiple maritime environments. While larger ships were often redeployed to distant theaters or assigned to support major fleet operations, MTBs stayed focused on the challenging world of coastal warfare. Their missions, though smaller in scale compared to ground naval engagements, played a vital role in restricting enemy movements and supporting the rapid Allied advance through Western Europe. One major challenge during this period involved German attempts to reposition equipment and personnel along the coast as their defensive lines contracted. Although larger naval units had been significantly depleted, German forces still maintained coastal convoys tasked with moving remaining supplies to fortified positions. These convoys relied increasingly on smaller vessels that could navigate shallow waters, areas where MTBs excelled in intercepting and disrupting movement. The agility of MTBs made them ideal for tracking such convoys. They could operate exceptionally close to shore, maneuvering in areas where the risk of grounding or minefields would deter larger craft. This capability allowed them to strike at transport barges and support ships that played critical roles in sustaining German defensive pockets. Eliminating even a single vessel could stall the movement of ammunition, ration stores, or engineering equipment needed to reinforce coastal positions. Many of these interceptions occurred at night, when convoys hoped to slip through gaps in Allied patrol patterns. But MTB crews, having honed their nighttime operational skills over years of engagements, were adept at detecting subtle clues that signaled enemy movement. A faint silhouette against moonlight, a muffled engine tone, or the reflection of light on waves often provided enough information to initiate pursuit. Once contact was made, MTB flotillas executed coordinated attack maneuvers. They divided enemy escorts, forced convoys into predictable defensive patterns, and used their speed to exploit weaknesses. Torpedo strikes followed by rapid withdrawals became standard practice. Even when convoys managed to evade initial attacks, the presence of MTBs forced them to continuously alter routes and timing, leading to increased operational strain. Beyond direct engagements, MTBs provided a constant stream of valuable intelligence. They observed changes in coastal traffic patterns, monitored construction along occupied shorelines, and reported the appearance of new defensive structures. This information helped guide Allied ground forces advancing toward remaining German strongpoints. As the front moved eastward, MTBs found themselves operating in a wider variety of conditions. Some areas featured narrow estuaries and rivers where shallow channels and shifting sandbanks created hazardous navigation. Yet the boat's lightweight construction and responsive handling allowed crews to overcome these challenges. Their ability to maneuver through such environments extended Allied reach into areas where conventional naval units could not operate. Meanwhile, the flotillas continued to refine their techniques. They adopted improved reconnaissance procedures, utilizing both visual spotting and radar equipment to track enemy movements. Updated communication systems enhanced coordination with aircraft and larger naval vessels. These enhancements allowed MTBs to integrate seamlessly into combined arms operations, maximizing their impact across different scenarios. The crew's adaptability remained a defining strength. They consistently found innovative solutions to operational challenges, from improvising repairs at sea to adjusting tactics based on environmental conditions. Their creativity often extended to modifying their boats in ways that gave them an edge during engagements. Some crews reinforced vulnerable areas with additional layers of wood or metal. Others experimented with different arrangements of light weapons to increase defensive capability. Though the physical demands of MTB service remained significant, morale stayed remarkably high. The fast-paced nature of operations, the sense of purpose, and the tight bonds formed between crew members contributed to a strong esprit de corps. These qualities proved essential as they faced the final months of the war, where unpredictability remained a constant factor. The MTB's persistent presence continued to shape enemy behavior. German commanders increasingly avoided daytime movements, relied on dispersed convoys, and prioritized heavily escorted routes. Yet even these measures failed to eliminate the threat. The MTBs maintained a tempo of operations that wore down German resources and further isolated coastal strongpoints. By early 1945, the combination of land advances and maritime pressure forced remaining German convoys to abandon many of their coastal routes. MTBs, having played a critical role in limiting their options, shifted to new tasks, including supporting liberation operations along the coast and aiding in the stabilization of recaptured ports. Their influence extended beyond the immediate tactical environment. The rapid construction and deployment of MTBs allowed the Royal Navy to allocate heavier ships to areas where they were most needed. This strategic flexibility, made possible in part by the humble Plywood boats, helped sustain Allied momentum as victory approached. Despite their accomplishments, MTBs remained modest vessels by design. They lacked the grandeur of battleships, the endurance of cruisers, or the firepower of destroyers. Yet their contribution to the war effort was undeniable. Through persistence, ingenuity, and speed, they reshaped the dynamics of coastal warfare and ensured that Allied forces maintained control over vital maritime zones. As Europe moved toward liberation and the conflict neared its end, the story of MTBs would soon transition from active service to historical legacy, a legacy defined not by overwhelming force, but by resourceful solutions that aligned perfectly with the needs of a nation facing immense challenges. With Germany steadily losing ground and supply routes shrinking, MTBs found new dimensions to their work during the final stages of the war. As Allied forces liberated port after port, the coastal environment became increasingly complex. Mines littered waterways, abandoned vessels posed navigational hazards, and damaged infrastructure required careful monitoring. In this shifting landscape, MTBs served not only as strike craft but as flexible tools capable of adapting to emerging needs. One of their growing responsibilities involved clearing and securing access routes to newly liberated harbors. While minesweepers performed the bulk of this work, MTBs complemented these operations by screening the area for potential threats. Their speed allowed them to scout forward positions quickly, ensuring that minesweeping units could operate without interference. Their maneuverability also made them ideal for navigating around partially submerged obstacles and debris. During these operations, MTB crews leveraged their deep familiarity with coastal waters. They knew how to read tides, currents, and seabed contours, skills acquired through years of night patrols and high-speed maneuvers. Their experience allowed them to make informed decisions during missions where poor judgment could jeopardize vital supply channels. The MTBs also continued to intercept the remnants of German maritime activity. Though the once formidable E-boats were now limited in number, those that remained still posed risks to Allied shipping. The MTB's consistent presence discouraged these remnants from attempting bold operations. Engagements became less frequent but no less important, as preventing even occasional attacks ensured the safety of supply lines supporting ground offensives across Europe. As German strongholds along the coast were gradually surrounded, MTBs played roles in isolating these positions. They patrolled waterways leading to besieged ports and prevented evacuation attempts by sea. They also intercepted attempts to transport personnel or sensitive materials to areas still under German control. These operations often required extended patrols, as isolated ports sometimes attempted nighttime sorties to escape encirclement. In addition to these strategic tasks, MTBs increasingly supported humanitarian efforts. They assisted in evacuating civilians from dangerous areas, transported supplies to isolated communities, and helped stabilize regions still suffering from the aftermath of occupation. Their ability to navigate shallow and narrow waterways made them well suited for such tasks, allowing them to reach areas inaccessible to larger ships. Despite the shifting focus, MTB crews maintained the readiness and discipline that had defined their service throughout the war. Even as the strategic picture improved, they continued to train, refine procedures, and prepare for potential surprises. They recognized that the war was not yet over and that their efforts still played an essential role in maintaining Allied momentum. Their participation in post-liberation stability efforts highlighted the broader significance of light coastal forces within the larger naval framework. The adaptability of MTBs demonstrated how small, nimble vessels could contribute meaningfully to tasks beyond direct combat. Their presence reassured liberated populations, supported rebuilding efforts, and ensured that vital waterways remained secure during a volatile period. As Germany moved closer to surrender, MTB operations began shifting once again. Now, rather than facing an active enemy, they increasingly dealt with remnants, stragglers, and the debris left behind by years of conflict. They patrolled coastal routes to prevent unauthorized movements, assisted in clearing hazards, and provided security during the transition to peacetime operations. Yet even in these quieter missions, the underlying principles that had guided them throughout the war remained unchanged. Every decision balanced speed, precision, and situational awareness. Every patrol required an understanding of the unique challenges posed by coastal waters. Every engagement, even in the final weeks, demanded a commitment to maintaining effectiveness despite fatigue and uncertainty. By the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, MTBs had fulfilled a staggering range of responsibilities. They had evolved from emergency stopgap vessels into versatile assets that shaped coastal warfare, protected the invasion of Europe, and supported the final liberation of the continent. Their story, though rooted in maritime strategy, was ultimately one of ingenuity, adaptability, and the ability to transform modest means into decisive advantages. As the war concluded, attention turned to the future, specifically, what role these wooden, petrol-powered boats might play in a world no longer defined by global conflict. Some believed their purpose had been fulfilled. Others saw them as prototypes for a new era of fast attack craft. Regardless, their wartime record left little doubt that they had earned their place among the most effective naval innovations of the conflict. With hostilities ending, the massive military apparatus built during the war now faced a period of transition. For MTBs, this moment brought both recognition and uncertainty. Their wartime accomplishments were widely acknowledged, but their future role was less clear. Technological advancements, changing strategic priorities, and shifting naval doctrines all raised questions about whether these lightweight craft would remain essential in a peacetime navy. As demobilization began, many MTBs were decommissioned and placed into reserve fleets. Their lightweight wooden construction, while ideal for wartime mass production and rapid deployment, was not designed for decades of continuous service. Wooden hulls required significant maintenance, and the high-performance petrol engines had demanding upkeep schedules. These factors made long-term operation costly compared to more durable steel-built vessels. Nevertheless, not all MTBs immediately faded into obscurity. In the immediate aftermath of the war, many coastal areas still required vigilant patrols to ensure safe navigation and to prevent the movement of unauthorized vessels. MTBs were well suited for such missions. Their speed allowed them to respond quickly to incidents, while their shallow draft enabled them to enter areas that remain hazardous for larger ships. Additionally, some MTBs were repurposed for civilian use. Their compact size and high speed attracted the interest of those who saw potential in recreational or commercial adaptations. Several boats were converted into pleasure craft, while others found new life as small ferries or utility vessels. The transition from warship to civilian vessel required substantial modification, but the underlying hull designs proved versatile enough to accommodate new roles. In a few cases, MTBs were preserved for posterity. Recognizing their significance in wartime innovation and contribution to coastal warfare, historical societies and maritime museums sought to restore and display surviving examples. These preserved boats offered tangible connections to the ingenuity and resilience that had characterized their service. Visitors could examine the craftsmanship that went into their construction, appreciate the creativity of their design, and imagine the experiences of the crews who operated them under intense pressure. But even as MTBs entered this period of transformation, their legacy continued to influence naval design around the world. The concept of fast, lightweight attack vessels capable of delivering significant firepower aligned closely with emerging trends in naval warfare. As new nations began developing their coastal defenses, they looked toward the MTB model for inspiration. Influences could be seen in the early development of modern patrol boats, missile craft, and fast attack vessels that incorporated advanced propulsion systems and more durable materials. The fundamental idea behind MTBs, prioritizing speed, maneuverability, and cost efficiency, proved to be timeless. This approach shaped the philosophy behind several naval programs in the post-war era. Engineers refined hull shapes, experimented with new materials, and developed propulsion systems aimed at achieving higher speeds with greater fuel efficiency. These advancements sought to carry forward the core strengths of MTBs while addressing the limitations of wood construction and petrol engines. In Britain, the lessons learned from the MTB program influenced subsequent designs within the Royal Navy's coastal forces. Post-war craft incorporated steel or aluminum hulls, diesel engines, and improved weaponry. These vessels maintained the agility that made MTBs effective while addressing concerns about durability and maintenance. Some post-war fast attack craft even adopted similar dimensions, retaining the compact size that made MTBs so maneuverable during combat. The human legacy of MTBs was equally significant. The crews who had served aboard them brought valuable experience to post-war naval operations, training programs, and maritime industries. Their familiarity with fast-paced decision-making, coastal navigation, and small unit tactics contributed to evolving doctrines within the Royal Navy. Many former MTB officers and ratings continued their careers in maritime fields, applying the skills they had honed in wartime to civilian shipping, engineering, and shipbuilding. The stories of these crews shaped public understanding of coastal warfare. Memoirs, interviews, and personal accounts revealed the unique challenges and experiences of serving aboard such demanding vessels. These narratives highlighted the essential role MTBs played in safeguarding Britain's coastline during some of the war's most perilous moments. They also shed light on the camaraderie, dedication, and skill required to operate these fast, lightly constructed boats in unpredictable and hazardous conditions. As the years passed, the memory of MTB operations remained prominent in discussions of wartime innovation. Their success demonstrated that effective solutions need not be complex or expensive. Instead, they showed that identifying specific operational needs and crafting a tailored response, no matter how unconventional, could yield exceptional results. The post-war world continued to evolve, and with it, naval strategies shifted toward new technologies and emerging threats. Yet the influence of MTBs persisted, shaping the development of fast attack craft and reinforcing the importance of flexibility in maritime planning. Their legacy remained anchored in the idea that ingenuity and adaptability could overcome even the most daunting challenges. As time moved further from the war years, historians began reassessing the impact of MTBs within the broader context of naval warfare. Their success stood in sharp contrast to the assumptions prevalent before the conflict. At the outset of the war, few believed that wooden boats powered by petrol engines could meaningfully contribute to victory in a modern maritime environment dominated by steel-hulled warships. Yet MTBs defied expectations and delivered results that reshaped strategic thinking. One of the most striking elements highlighted in post-war analyses was the cost-effectiveness of MTBs. Their low production price allowed Britain to deploy them in large numbers, creating a diverse and adaptable force that could respond to a wide variety of threats. This flexibility proved invaluable during periods when traditional naval assets were stretched thin or unavailable. MTBs filled gaps that larger ships couldn't, providing constant coverage across vulnerable coastal zones. Another frequently cited factor was the speed with which MTBs could be replaced if lost. Unlike destroyers or cruisers, which required lengthy construction times and substantial resource investments, MTBs could be produced and deployed rapidly. This allowed the Royal Navy to maintain operational strength even when faced with losses, enabling them to sustain effective coastal patrols and offensive operations across multiple fronts. Beyond their economic advantages, MTBs also demonstrated the value of decentralized decision-making in naval combat. Commanders granted flotilla leaders significant autonomy, trusting their judgment to execute missions based on real-time conditions. This trust encouraged initiative and creativity among crews, leading to innovative tactics that enhanced the effectiveness of MTB operations. Such flexibility was particularly beneficial in the dynamic environment of coastal warfare, where conditions could change rapidly and unpredictably. In addition, the success of MTBs illustrated the importance of aligning capabilities with mission requirements. Traditional naval forces excelled at deep-water engagements, long-range patrols, and fleet operations. However, the unique challenges of the Channel, narrow waters, heavy traffic, and shifting weather patterns, required a different approach. MTBs were tailor-made for this environment, combining speed, maneuverability, and sufficient firepower to meet the demands of coastal conflict. Their impact was also measured in terms of opportunity cost imposed on the enemy. By forcing Germany to allocate more resources to coastal defense, escorts, patrol craft, and additional personnel, MTBs indirectly weakened the strength available for other fronts. This redistribution of resources contributed to the gradual erosion of German naval capabilities, particularly in contested waters where the threat of MTB attacks remained constant. Furthermore, historians have noted the role MTBs played in fostering technological experimentation. The boats served as testbeds for new ideas, from propulsion systems to weapon configurations and communication equipment. Innovations trialed on MTBs informed future naval development, influencing the design of more advanced fast-attack craft in the post-war era. Public memory of MTBs also played a significant role in shaping their legacy. Bookstores, museums, and documentaries highlighted their contributions, emphasizing the ingenuity of their construction and the bravery of their crews. These narratives resonated with audiences who appreciated stories of resourcefulness and determination in the face of adversity. MTBs captured the imagination precisely because they embodied an unconventional approach to warfare, one that relied on creativity as much as on hardware. This public interest encouraged efforts to preserve surviving MTBs. Restoration projects sought to return these boats to their wartime appearance, ensuring that future generations could appreciate their construction and design. Some restored MTBs served as educational platforms, offering visitors insights into the daily life of coastal forces during the conflict. These artifacts helped bridge the gap between historical accounts and lived experience, making the story of MTBs more accessible and engaging. The continued recognition of MTBs speaks to the enduring relevance of their contributions. In a war characterized by massive industrial output and advanced technology, these small, wooden boats stood out as examples of how strategic insight and adaptability could yield outsized results. Their legacy remains a reminder that the most effective solutions often emerge from a clear understanding of the environment and a willingness to embrace unconventional approaches. Reflecting on the legacy of MTBs reveals a story rooted not in overwhelming firepower or technological dominance, but in the capacity to adapt, innovate, and respond to an urgent strategic need. As Britain faced the pressing threat of coastal raids and resource strain early in the war, the introduction of MTBs represented a bold shift from traditional naval doctrine. Instead of relying solely on established warships, the Royal Navy embraced a flexible and cost-efficient solution that leveraged existing craftsmanship and materials. This decision proved transformative. By utilizing lightweight wooden construction and powerful engines, MTBs delivered exceptional speed and maneuverability. Their ability to operate effectively in shallow and confined coastal waters set them apart from larger warships, enabling them to challenge enemy movements in areas previously considered difficult to defend. Even though MTBs lack the armor and firepower of their larger counterparts, their agility and tactical versatility made them invaluable assets in a conflict defined by rapid shifts and evolving challenges. The success of MTBs underscored the importance of aligning design with mission requirements. Rather than attempting to create a smaller version of a destroyer, engineers and naval planners focused on developing a boat that excelled within specific operational parameters. This targeted approach allowed MTBs to thrive in environments where traditional warships struggled, giving Britain a strategic advantage during critical phases of the war. The contributions of MTB crews further amplified the effectiveness of these vessels. Their commitment, skill, and adaptability transformed simple hulls and engines into formidable tools of coastal defense. Crews became experts in night operations, coastal navigation, and rapid response tactics. Their readiness to innovate, whether through adjusting tactics, modifying equipment, or mastering the nuances of their craft, helped maximize the potential of MTBs across a wide range of missions. These missions extended far beyond direct engagements with enemy vessels. MTBs supported major operations, including the protection of convoys, reconnaissance missions, and the lead-up to the Normandy landings. They also played crucial roles in maintaining coastal security during the final stages of the war, intercepting attempts to move personnel or supplies between isolated strongholds. Their presence deterred enemy activity and ensured that vital waterways remained open for Allied forces. The MTB's impact was not limited to tactical outcomes. Strategically, they forced the enemy to divert valuable resources to coastal defense. They disrupted supply routes, delayed operations, and contributed to the broader pressure applied on German forces as the Allied advance accelerated. Each engagement, interception, and escort mission enhanced the cumulative effect of Allied efforts across the European theatre. As peace returned, the transition of MTBs into history did not diminish their significance. Their influence persisted in the design principles of post-war fast attack craft and patrol boats. Their construction showcased the effectiveness of rapid production using adaptable materials and highlighted the importance of tailoring equipment to the unique demands of coastal environments. The experiences of their crews enriched naval traditions, informing training programs and shaping future maritime strategies. Today, the story of MTBs remains a testament to the ingenuity and resilience displayed during the war. It reminds us that effective solutions do not always require complex technology or substantial investment. Sometimes, the best approach emerges from a clear understanding of the challenge and a willingness to explore novel ideas. The MTBs embodied this mindset, demonstrating that even modest vessels, constructed from everyday materials, could wield enormous strategic influence when deployed with vision and purpose. Their legacy endures through preserved examples, historical accounts, and the lasting impact they had on naval operations. These boats, once underestimated for their simple construction, proved themselves indispensable during one of the most demanding periods in Britain's maritime history. They stand as enduring symbols of how innovation, adaptability, and determination can shape outcomes even in the most challenging circumstances.